Phonics is just a little bit different because the two key words with phonics are cumulative and structured. And that means that when you're teaching early literacy, you really want the students to build on knowledge that they already have. You can switch literacy into two levels. You can do the learning to read part of it, which is what we are all about, which is the phonics. And then you've got the reading to learn part, which comes after you've done that. Our brains are not designed for spelling and reading. They're absolutely wired in most cases for us to learn language, but they're not really wired for us to learn how to read. In terms of all the European languages that we have, English is not just the most difficult, it really is a complete outlier.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today? Hello and welcome to the 121st episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. My name, dear listeners, is Ludo Miller, the host of this podcast. Welcome back to our regular listeners. Welcome to any of you for whom this is your first time listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast. And of course, a huge welcome to today's guest, Sandra Pyne. Sandra, welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a sweltering day here in East London. And I believe we'll get onto it in just a second, where you are too, but you've got a real story and a journey behind where you base your work and your life. So before I ruin that for our listeners, let me just give a brief introduction to Sandra. So Sandra started her career as a lexicographer at Oxford University Press, compiling dictionaries for learners of English as a second language. Really cool and interesting language-focused job there. And then Sandra moved into teaching and built up a great deal of experience as a primary school teacher and tutor across all subjects, as well as a literary specialist. Sandra then spent 15 years or so as a teacher at a pretty cool and innovative state bilingual international school in Berlin, where she was head of English, special educational needs and admissions. Now, in her time as a teacher, Sandra qualified as a dyslexia and literary specialist, and today is really a very well experienced assessor of dyslexia and a specialist dyslexia tutor. Now, in and amongst all of that, it's the most wonderful roll call of roles and positions. 4 years ago, Sandra stepped out of the classroom, as so many listeners and members of the Qualified Tutor community have done, stepped out of the classroom to create her company, Fruit Salad Publishing, which publishes literary resources for younger learners. Now, in 2022, Jigsaw Phonics Tutoring is launching, and it's a membership for tutors, teachers and educators who would like a roadmap to starting their own tutoring business with a focus on early literacy. Now, as I just mentioned, Sandra's company, Sandra is based in Berlin. The company is based in Wales itself. And these days, Sandra, living in her camper van, is able to drift and dot and travel around Europe. So Sandra, for our listeners and myself, where are you currently based for this podcast?
I am currently based at home, just outside of Berlin, which is a little bit boring, I know, getting ready for the heat wave. But my favourite office of all my offices that I've had this year was January in Andalusia, when I was sitting under the peach blossom in 20 degrees of sunshine doing my work. that's why I love traveling around in the camper van.
You are actually, Jack Simmons, a member of the Qualified Tutor team, is also a camper van enthusiast, has been traveling around southern Britain. So it's really an option for any of you sitting in your office at home listening to this, thinking, gosh, I'm hot. Gosh, I would not like to be working, living in the city anymore. Then the camper van life really could be for you. And Sandra, perhaps through the kind of tales and stories that you tell over the next 25 minutes or so, it might become clear that the camper van life is very conducive to being a tutor and an online educator in today's market. So I gather, Sandra, that you have been able to come across some school reports, or at least a tale that you remember from the days of your youth. Is that right?
I've been slightly re-traumatized looking at the school reports or tales of my youth. And the one thing that really, really sticks out, and it stands out, was way back in the day. I'm from Bournemouth in Dorset, so I went to school down on the south coast. And we had the lovely Jurassic Coast on our doorstep, and we had a school trip to the Jurassic Coast. And it was getting towards the end of the day. It was time to go home. And I was an old beach hand. I grew up on the beach. I knew about the beach. And I was 10 or 11. So just at that age where you start to get a little bit more self-aware. And we were on our way. We had been reading Mary Anning's Treasures at school. We were looking for fossils on the beach. And I somehow slipped and fell bum first into a rock pool. And the teachers thought it was the funniest thing. I nearly died. I thought the whole world was looking at me, and I thought the only reason a kid on the beach has got a wet bum is because they've wet themselves, and I was just mortified. And got over it, got home. Everything was good, dried off. And then it was, of course, near the end of the school year. The school reports were coming out, and then the teacher had written at the bottom of my school report how happy he was to crown me Miss Rockpool of that year. And I had to explain to my parents what had gone on. And I was just mortified all over again. And it seems like nothing now. And it's a kind of a nice memory now. But at the time, I just remember that age, that being 10 or 11, and just being super self-conscious. But yeah. I can recommend Lyme Regis. I can recommend Mary Anning's Treasures. But I can't recommend being 11 and falling in a rock pool.
Make sure you take care on those rock pools. I think students often fear their school reports, but I've never heard it put like that. I've never heard that be the reason why you can't bear to read your latest school report. So, Sandra, sounds like an amusing, but perhaps at the time traumatic tale. But
yep.
Do you think then that your youth and your childhood experience at school is what has led you to what you do now, to why you do what you do now?
Not so much at school, I think. I was always really interested in language. And it was when I got to university, I went to university to do a linguistics and phonetics degree. And I came across so many people who still seem to have a little bit of difficulty with reading and spelling, even though they've made it to university. And I was very curious about why this would be that it is so easy for some people and it's not really that easy for other people. So that's when my interest really kicked off.
And then after that, was it that interest in language that led you to become a teacher?
That was a lot of it, yeah. And I'd always done a lot of volunteer tutoring for adults for functional literacy skills, and I'd done a lot of research on reading and spelling as part of my studies for children, and I'd done a lot of TEFL teaching as a student, so it just seemed to be a natural thing to move into the classroom.
And then, so why did you get into tutoring then?
Because I qualified as a dyslexia specialist, and I did a lot of individual tutoring because I assessed students and then I developed tailored interventions for them that I then taught them. And I moved around. I've always been an international teacher, so I've always been in Berlin, and I moved around various international schools. They asked me to come in specially to help the students because they didn't have specialists. at their own schools.
Yeah. Now, Sandra, you're an avid listener to this podcast itself, as I implore all fellow qualified tutor guests to be. But you know that we like to approach the conversation around our guest's background and how they came to do what they do now with the framing of your why, and finding out what your why is. Do you think that you have a why, Sandra? And if so, what would that be?
I definitely have a why, and I think it's really important to have a why, because things get a little bit confusing and chaotic and difficult, especially if you decide to sort of go in the business direction, which is what I'm doing. And my why is because I really would like to do what I want to do, and that's a professional why and that's a personal why. And the professional why is that I really want to help children learn to read, and the personal why is I really want to be able to live and move around Europe in this phase of my life. So this gives me the opportunity to do both.
That is really the freelance educator's tale, isn't it? Is having the flexibility and the freedom to help students and children in the way that you want to, and design and a program designed by yourself. I think that's amazing, Sandra. And you have this wonderful twist to it. It's about phonics and it's about literacy with you and your work, Sandra. Now, I'm going to ask a potentially tricky question here, but I believe it's one that you will be an equal match to, Sandra. Why then is literacy in English so hard? Why, despite the prevalence and quality of good teachers, is reading and spelling just so difficult for some?
It's a really good question, and teachers are doing a really, really good job teaching children to spell and read. But the reality is that our brains are not designed for spelling and reading. They're absolutely wired in most cases for us to learn language, but they're not really wired for us to learn how to read. And that's where it gets difficult. It's a man-made skill. What we're trying to do is we're trying to code spoken language as written language. And I think if you ask children or people, how good are you at coding, it kind of starts to be a whole other question. And I think the assumption has been that just because we can speak and we can talk, then the reading and the writing and the spelling should be just as easy. And it really isn't the case. And the other reason is that English is just really difficult, and we don't give enough time and thought to that, I think. And it's in terms of all the European languages that we have, English is not just the most difficult, it really is a complete outlier, because we have letters and sounds that just don't match in any reasonable way, and some languages just do. So if you're teaching Finnish children, or if you're teaching Spanish children or Italian children literacy, you can get done in 3 to 6 months what it takes about 3.5 years for teachers to do. So there's a huge discrepancy in the language that we're teaching, and teachers know exactly how to teach children to read. And what they very often say is, how do you fit it in? There isn't enough time. How do we get it all done? How do you do that reading with small groups? How do you do that individual reading? And that's the point. Teachers know what they're doing, but I think the difficulty of English is really underestimated, and they just need more time, which I think is where tutoring can be quite helpful, because for those children who do need that extra little bit of time, and especially for the younger learners who are a little bit too young maybe to start learning right off the bat when they get to school, tutoring is really a good option for them to catch up on the things that teachers can do very well but just don't have time to do.
So you've set up Jigsaw Phonics Tutoring. I assume then that is as a way to further that mission you just said there, which is tutoring is a great route for assisting teachers in areas such as phonics and helping with literacy. Can you tell us a bit more about how Jigsaw, your business, helps children to read?
Well, we are, as we speak now, launching a membership, and the idea of that membership connects back to the question that you asked me in the beginning, which is, what is my why? And my why is to help more children learn to read. And the way to help more children learn to read is to get more tutors out there who are really absolutely confident in the knowledge that they have and the way that they deliver lessons and the materials that they're using. And that's what we're all about, to give them that knowledge, that confidence, to help them do what we all want to do, which is to help children learn to read. So it's a combination of business training, marketing and communication training so that they can get their businesses quickly, financially and legally viable. And then there's the academic side, which is the materials and the training that they need so that they can be sure that they're delivering lessons that are really well structured for children so that they get the outcomes that everybody wants.
I'm really interested to know, Sandra, did you believe in your educational career to date, up until you launched Fruit Salad Publishing a few years ago and now Jigsaw? Did you feel that running your own education business was the goal for you? Or when you were a dyslexia assessor and a specialist dyslexia teacher, did you think that was what you were going to do forever?
It's a really good point. There are seasons in life, I think, where you decide, am I going to do this forever? And it would have been easy. It would have been nice. I could have done it forever. But then I thought, do I just want to do that really creative thing by myself? Or actually, there's also Barbara in the office in Wales. Do I want to get out there and just use all the experience of the knowledge I've had over all these years to do something slightly different, and taking the experience that I've had as a tutor, because I'm not just a dyslexia tutor, I also tutor phonics to small groups, and I also do some exam preparation for children here in Germany. I do that kind of tutoring. So I wanted to take all the phonics knowledge and the literacy knowledge that I have, combined with all the experience that I've had tutoring, and turn it into something that I think was something I wanted when I was starting out. This is often the story. We start these things because we didn't have it ourselves. And that's what Jigsaw Phonics Tutoring is all about. It's there to give teachers and educators that business and marketing and communications roadmap along with the academic side, so they can be really confident that they're on the right route in their next step.
I think that's, you've hit the nail on the head there with those kind of origin stories of so many, especially education businesses. It's a perceived lack or flaw in the education market that someone wishes to plug, something that they didn't have at a particular point in life. So I really think this membership could be that problem solver for many small education business leaders who are looking to grow. Now, if that's okay with you, Sandra, we're just going to turn to a topic that you've talked to me about before, the topic of pre-prepared lessons and how that fits in with the wider tutoring market and the development of that, and about which many tutors are frankly quite skeptical about pre-prepared lessons. Obviously, many aren't and swear by them. But can you give us a little insight into how you see it and then how Jigsaw Phonics Tutoring sees it?
Well, part of the membership that we are opening includes 90 pre-prepared phonics and literacy lessons. And it's really a hot topic. A lot of teachers or tutors, they say, I like to prepare my own lessons. I like them to fit my own students. I like to follow my own line of thought. But phonics is just a little bit different, because the two key words with phonics are cumulative and structured. And that means that when you're teaching early literacy, you really want the students to build on knowledge that they already have. So you have to play a little bit of word Jenga. When you teach phonics, you start with a certain number of sounds and you need to fit them together to make words that children will be able to decode. And that is really very, very meticulous kind of forensic work to build lessons up so children are never seeing something that's completely brand new. So that's where I think the value of these pre-prepared lessons are. Teachers can be very sure that they've got a structured, cumulative program that isn't going to wrong-foot students who really need that extra reassurance that they're not meeting something that they've never met before, that they have to try and decode a word that they don't know the individual sounds to. So that is what I think is the value of having a structured program to teach early literacy.
And so why did you go down that route then for your membership?
Because it will save teachers a huge amount of time. I mean, to put those kinds of structured cumulative lessons together to select the words that you need so carefully so that you can really make sure that the children can make the progress that they need to make took a lot of hours. And teachers don't have to do that. They've got it there. And they can use, there are many ways that they can use the lessons. They can just teach the lessons as they are. They can use them as the backbone of what they're teaching and add on extra things that they might like to teach. But they know that they've got the basic backbone of a structured literacy program that they could teach. And what's also really nice, I think, about our program is that we have 3 little characters that the children can get very emotionally connected to. And what those characters do is they support metacognition. They show children how they need to read or spell the words that they are looking at. So we've got a little panda character that tells children that they can sound out their words, phonetic words that they can read without needing to memorize them in any way. We've got the little robot character, the tricky words character, so children know that their sounding out won't work. And then we've got a little alien character, so children know that they're not reading or spelling real words when they come across the little alien character. So it's a structured program with extra help with metacognition for the children.
I would ask you to go further, Sandra, but I think we'd be undercutting the membership program at that point. I feel like those 3 characters you've built up to associate certain, categories of words in the children's mind, I think that's so powerful. So I won't ask you to reveal the secrets of your theories and processes here. But listeners, you've been given more than a teaser, more than an idea of why there's so much value to that phonics membership. And also, I should say that, really, although phonics is certainly a pretty core, pretty central topic to tutoring English, the concept of being literate, of having good literacy skills, it's not exclusive to tutors of English. And in fact, there was a brilliant talk by our own Andrea Gadsby at the Love Tutoring Festival too, just gone at the end of June, about literacy across the curriculum and how an important understanding of how words work and the meaning of them is necessary for comprehension across the subjects. It's not just for English, and actually that applies therefore to tutors of subjects as well, not just the students. So if you are a tutor of a subject that's not English and you're thinking, I don't think literacy applies to me, know that understanding how words work and their meaning is important for the comprehension in every single subject.
That's exactly true. And I was at that talk and it was really, really good. And I think you can switch literacy into 2 levels. You can do the learning to read part of it, which is what we are all about, which is the phonics. And then you've got the reading to learn part, which comes after you've done that. And I think that's exactly true. I mean, all teachers are literacy teachers. And, and you can, the important approach I think to take once you're past the learning to read and you're into the reading to learn is just to take that morphological approach to break those complicated words down into their chunks of meaning and get children interested in what the language is doing, and they will also remember it. You chunk it up, you give it meaning. That's the way to do it. That's exactly right.
But also, as someone with a linguistics degree myself, I'm also deeply fascinated as a kind of very scientific study of English itself and of languages. So, Sandra, you're absolutely right there. It's you're speaking from a place of real experience and expertise because of your degree and all the work you've done, but also I think you're really helping to show that it's not just for tutors of English or teachers of English. Now, another topic that we hear a lot about, and we get a lot of questions about, as part of our community, and I'm sure you do too, Sandra, is this idea of teaching phonics and whether that is more effective in a group setting or in a one-to-one tuition. Can you effectively teach phonics in a small group setting? So I wondered if you could just share some light on your insights into small group versus one-to-one tuition.
I can. I think there is definitely a place for both. And if I speak from my experience of tutoring dyslexic students, I can give you an example. If I am going in to support a dyslexic student, as I quite often do, I'm thinking of one of my students. He was dyslexic, he was autistic, and he was visually impaired. And autistic students often have special interests. And his special interest was weather, and it was extreme weather, and it was the statistics involved in extreme weather. Because he had some visual issues, he needed everything produced in large print. So I would prepare the lessons around his interests in ways that he could access them most successfully visually. And that really needed a one-to-one situation that wouldn't work well in a group. So I think when there are really very specific needs, one-to-one works incredibly well. On the other hand, I also teach in small groups and I also teach online, and that works well. If there are students who need some catching up, if they don't have those very specific issues that some students do have, it works just as well in a small group, and quite often better because there's a different energy in a small group. They enjoy being with each other. They've got partners to work with. It's a completely different story. And it's really, really interesting how the value is perceived. When I go into schools and teach these one-to-one lessons, the hourly rate that I charge is perceived to be really rather expensive. But by the time I've traveled there, prepared it, traveled home, debriefed any other teachers who were in the school, done any of the admin surrounding that, it doesn't actually turn out to be as well paid as it looks to be if you just took the hourly rate. Whereas if I teach a small group of children, it's not perceived by the people paying for it to be at all expensive. It's perceived to be really good value, and it's for a tutor from a business point of view, it's actually a very good business model. It just allows you to do more of the other things that you might like to do as well as the tutoring, which I think is what a lot of people are looking for, that kind of balance of not working all the time but having some extra time to do other things. So that's been my personal experience.
And that point there is an amazing exponent of how the Jigsaw Phonics membership looks out for the business of small education businesses, and not just the academic side and the pedagogy. So we are, as many listeners will know, and I'm sure you know as well, Sandra, at QT, very much we intend to serve the business aspect of tutoring companies as well as the pedagogical and kind of research-informed effective learning strategies side of tutors and agency tutors. So, yeah, I think that's really important, that the profitable value of small group tuition, but also the constructive value of having partners, as you say, in learning. And now a word from last week's guest, Linda Ugolo.
I realize that everything that we do in life can be applied to some other area of life. And it's really fun to make the connections. I really love how Ludo is very down to earth, very straightforward, very conversational, a real guy who shares his experiences and our conversations, and not afraid to, not concerned with being polished, but more about being helpful. I would recommend for a future podcast guest to ask a lot of questions in order to, from Ludo about the audience, in order to get a very clear idea and stimulate your own ideas about how you can be of service and helpful to everyone who listens.
Now, Sandra, we're just coming to a close here, but there's one more question that I'd like to ask you, as we often do here at the QT podcast. Looking forward, so there's so many wonderful things you've done, and in the last few years, it's really taken off another level. You're into a new season, as you would put it, of your life and your career. What's next for you? What's next for Sandra Pyne?
Well, from a business point of view, it's launching a membership, helping, as I said before, teachers and educators to really get their tutoring businesses started with a focus on early literacy. And for me personally, I think it's packing the camper van at the end of the summer and heading off down to southern Spain and not having to sit through another Northern European winter.
Is that because the winters in Spain are more amenable?
They are wonderful. Blue sky, sunshine. You can have peach blossom in January. If you're just outside of Berlin, you get grey sky, no peach blossom, and not much sunshine.
And there's no longer a desire to jump in the lake.
Not at all.
Well, Sandra, thank you so much for coming on. I know that there's so much that you wanted to talk about. I know you've contacted me in the past about the things that you'd like to discuss, whether as part of the community, at the festival, on the podcast. So I'm very glad that we've been able to give our listeners that really expertise-informed view of phonics and literacy. And I believe this was your first podcast appearance. Is that right?
It is.
Wow, look at that.
Hopefully all right, yeah.
Hopefully the springboard for many more in the future, because there's a lot of different areas of tutoring that need to hear the things that you're saying, Sandra.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, well, it's a real pleasure, and it's brilliant to speak to someone like you and to continue the really strong thread of phonics through from the festival, Andrea's talk, and through onto this podcast here post festival. I have actually one final question, Sandra.
Go.
Do you have a favourite letter or sound?
That is a really good one. I like the sound A or the letter A, actually.
First of all,
for lots of good reasons. And I think it's a really good explanation of what goes on in phonics. I mean, when we teach phonics, we teach the sound A, which is great in words like cat, but works very badly in words like apron or apricot, and is not anything like it looks if you see the word wash. So this is really a really good example of how English is just really, really difficult to teach, and how teachers out there are really just doing an amazing job with what is a really, really difficult language.
That's a wonderful rallying cry, to end, Sandra. If you'd like to find out more about Sandra or Jigsaw Phonics, you can head to jigsawphonicstutoring.com. Sandra, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Ludo.
Okay then, cheerio, and see you all next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Whether you're a regular listener of this podcast or you've just stumbled across it, join the Qualified Tutor Podcast group within the Qualified Tutor community to stay up to date with our latest news, offers, workshops, and of course, simply to meet other tutors like you. Whatever your level as a tutor, our training courses will be the next step in your professional development. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/training to find out more about our CPD accredited and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. Your student deserves the best tutor possible. Make that happen today by joining Qualified Tutor